Carbon footprint. Part 2. ISO 14067. These are the list acronym in this video. Climate change arising from anthropogenic activity has been identified as one of the greatest challenges facing the world and will continue to affect business and citizens over future decades. Climate change has implications for both human and natural systems and could lead to significant impacts on resource availability, economic activity, and human well-being. In response, international, regional, national and local initiatives are being developed and implemented by public and private sectors to mitigate greenhouse gas, GHG, concentrations in the Earth's atmosphere as well as to facilitate adaptation to climate change. The ISO 14060 family provides clarity and consistency for quantifying, monitoring, reporting and validating or verifying GHG emissions and removals to support sustainable development through a low-carbon economy. It also benefits organizations, project proponents, and stakeholders worldwide by providing clarity and consistency on quantifying, monitoring, reporting, and validating or verifying GHG emissions and removals. Specifically, the use of the ISO 14060 family enhances the environmental integrity of GHG quantification, enhances the credibility, consistency, and transparency of GHG quantification, monitoring, reporting, validation and verification, facilitates the development and implementation of GHG management strategies and plans, facilitates the development and implementation of mitigation actions through emission reductions or removal enhancements, facilitates the ability to track performance and progress in the reduction of GHG emissions and or increase in GHG removals. Applications of the ISO 14060 family include corporate decisions, such as identifying GHG emission reduction opportunities and increasing profitability by reducing energy consumption, carbon risk management, such as the identification and management of risks and opportunities, voluntary initiatives, such as participation in voluntary GHG registries or sustainability reporting initiatives, GHG markets, such as the buying and selling of GHG allowances or credits, regulatory/government GHG programs, such as credit for early action agreements or national and local reporting initiatives. ISO 14064-1 details principles and requirements for designing, developing, managing, and reporting organization-level GHG inventories. ISO 14064-2 details principles and requirements for determining baselines and for the monitoring, quantifying, and reporting of project emissions. ISO 14064-3 details requirements for verifying GHG statements related to GHG inventories, GHG projects, and carbon footprints of products. ISO 14065 defines requirements for bodies that validate and verify GHG statements. ISO 14066 specifies competence requirements for validation teams and verification teams. ISO 14067 This document defines the principles, requirements, and guidelines for the quantification of the carbon footprint of products. Specifically, using life cycle assessment according to this international standard with climate change as the single impact category may offer benefits through avoiding burden shifting from one stage of a product life cycle to another or between product life cycles, providing requirements for the quantification of the CFP, facilitating CFP performance tracking and reducing GHG emissions, providing a better understanding of the CFP such that potential opportunities for increases in GHG removals and reductions of GHG emissions might be identified, helping to promote a sustainable low-carbon economy, enhancing the credibility, consistency, and transparency of the quantification and reporting of the CFP, facilitating the evaluation of alternative product design and sourcing options, production and manufacturing methods, raw material choices, transportation, recycling and other end-of-life processes, facilitating the development and implementation of GHG management strategies and plans across product life cycles, as well as the detection of additional efficiencies in the supply chain, preparing reliable CFP information. CFPs prepared in accordance with this document contribute to the objectives of GHG-related policies and/or regimes. The international standard specifies principles, requirements, and guidelines for the quantification and communication of the carbon footprint of a product. Based on the International Standards on Life Cycle Assessment, ISO 14040 series, and on environmental claims, labels and declarations, ISO 14020 series. Requirement and guidelines for the quantification and communication of a partial carbon footprint of a product, partial CFP, are also provided. The international standard is applicable to CFP studies and different forms of communication based on the results of such studies. It also provides for the development of CFP product category rules, CFP PCR, or the adoption of product category rules, PCR, that have been developed in accordance with ISO 14025 and that are consistent with this international standard. This international standard addresses only one impact category, climate change. There is a few term that relating to carbon footprint quantification, which is partial carbon footprint of a product, partial CFP, carbon footprint of a product study, CFP study, carbon footprint of a product study report, CFP study report, and offsetting. Next is term that relating to the carbon footprint communication. First is Carbon Footprint Communication Program or CFP Program, Carbon Footprint Program Operator or CFP Program Operator. Next is Carbon Footprint External Communication Report, Carbon Footprint Performance Tracking Report, Carbon Footprint Label CFP Label, Carbon Footprint Claim CFP Claim, and lastly Carbon Footprint Declaration CFP Declaration. What is product? Product is refer to any good or services. Example of services is like transport and electricity. Next is software, for example computer program. The example of hardware is engine mechanical part. Other than that, processed material is for example fuel, and lastly example of unprocessed material is agricultural produce. A product category rules, PCR, set of specific rules, requirements, and guidelines for developing Type 3 environmental declarations, ISO 14050:2009, 8.5, for one or more product categories. Note 1 to entry, PCR include quantification rules compliant with ISO 14044. Carbon footprint of a product category rules, CFP PCR, set of specific rules, requirements, and guidelines for quantification and communication on the CFP for one or more product categories. Life cycle perspective. The development of CFP quantification and CFP communication takes into consideration all stages of the life cycle of a product, from raw material acquisition through production, use, and end-of-life stage to final disposal. Principles for CFP quantification and reporting. Relative approach and functional unit. Iterative approach. Scientific approach. Relevance. Completeness. Consistency. Coherence. Accuracy. Transparency, and lastly, avoidance of double counting. There are three principles for CFP communication, which are participation, transparency, and fairness. Stay tuned for the next video.